So you're thinking of moving to Colorado and you're wondering if it's still a good place to live? In this video, we're gonna go exactly over that, and we're gonna get to it right now. What's up everybody, this is Angel and I'm a real estate agent over here in Denver, Colorado, and the first thing most people want to know when moving to Colorado is about politics. When it comes to politics, I'm not gonna lie, Colorado is actually going downhill from where it was in the past. Now, this is the most honest video you're gonna find on this topic, so you're gotta stay until the end. When it comes to real estate, the Colorado legislature was about to implement rent control. Of course, we know that's a terrible idea. It's terrible for everybody, for renters, for landlords, for homeowners even, and really the only beneficiary of any kind of policy like rent control, it's going to be the politicians because they get to tell the people that they're helping and whatever, but we all know it's a mistake. Even Keynesian economists and Austrian economists, that's one of the few points that they all agree. Rent control is a bad idea, and that's something that the legislature was pushing last year. Thankfully, it didn't pass, but they keep trying on passing it. So who knows what's going to happen in the future? What we know, it's starting to go downhill from that perspective. And not only that, but there was another bill where they were wanting to give the government what they call a right of first refusal. So basically, if you had a property, I think it was 5 units or more, a multifamily property, then if you wanted to sell that property, you first had to go with your local government to see if they wanted to buy it. And the government would buy it, they would be the new landlords. Of course, this would be a disaster because who wants the government to be the landlord? It's like when you go to the DMV and how long it takes for them to just give you any kind of document. It's always the worst type of workers. It's always the workers that are not motivated by profit. They don't have any kind of motivation. It reminds me of that movie Zootopia where the sloth works at the DMV and they're just so slow, they don't have any motivation. So imagine them being the landlords. Like, what's gonna happen? Like, you're gonna have the easiest repair request. It's gonna take weeks to get it done. And that's from the renter's perspective. Now, from the landlord's perspective, of course, sometimes you gotta sell quick, especially multifamily loans where the interest rates is not fixed throughout the 30-year period. Typically, there's multiple loan programs, but typically it resets every 5 to 10 years. So imagine that your interest rate resets, now it's 10%, and you're bleeding money every single month. And now you gotta give the government a right of first refusal. You gotta give them, I think it was like 2 weeks to let them know you intend to sell, and then they have like a month or 2 months to respond if they wanted to buy it or not. The landlord's gonna keep losing money in that period. And then also there's a lot of privacy concerns because if I'm a taxpayer and the government's buying a multifamily property, then what does that mean? Like, am I as a taxpayer allowed to even look at the list of the current people that are living there? I would think that's fair to say, right? They're using my tax money, so I would think I would at least get the information on who's living there. So that also creates privacy concerns for the renters. So it's just a huge problem. And what really concerns me is that it actually passed the House and the Senate, but then the governor came in and vetoed the bill. That's something that typically doesn't happen. So, but what I'm trying to get at is in this period, we actually got it to pass through both houses of Congress, but it got vetoed by the governor. So what's going to happen when that governor is gone and another one comes in? Like, this has a higher probability of passing in the future than other legislation. Now, of course, I'm just saying it's going downhill, but not everything is bad. They actually just passed another bill where they're allowing some medical use of mushrooms, and some research indicates that this could cure some disease. So of course, as long as it's medical and supervised, like, I don't see why that could be a problem. So if I was to map this chart, I would say we're going in a downward trajectory, but we're not as bad as other states, but we're heading in that direction. I just want to take a second to say I'm a real estate agent, and if you're thinking of moving to Denver, Colorado or the surrounding areas, you gotta reach out for a private one-on-one conversation where we're gonna talk about what you like and especially what you don't like so that we can narrow down your search and find you the perfect place. All of the information's in the description below. Now back to the video. Now, one thing that makes Colorado great is a great balanced lifestyle. And I'm saying this because I just love going into the mountains. I'm currently living in Lakewood, which is about 15 minutes from downtown Denver. And one of my favorite things about living in this area is all of the access to the trails that we have, but we also have the conveniences of living in the city. So like I told my wife, like, hey, I want to move to a mountain town, maybe Aspen or Breckenridge or one of those cool little mountain towns and just live in the mountains. And she says, there's no way, we gotta live in the city. But over here, like, we could drive 2 hours and we have some incredible hiking. We're gonna go into one of the best hiking and cycling spots in the country. But simultaneously, if we want to go to a concert, if we want to go to a sporting event, we have all of that within a 15-minute drive. But then all of this cool hiking and outdoor experiences within a 2-hour drive, even 1-hour drive. So it is a very balanced lifestyle, whereas you can have your life in the mountains, but you also can have your life in the city. And of course, what makes Colorado great is the great mountains. We have skiing, snowboarding, mountain biking, hiking, backpacking, one of my favorite activities to do. And now, speaking of a balanced lifestyle, the other thing that makes Colorado great is that people here are very health conscious. Colorado is the state that has the least obesity in all of the US. And of course, that has to do with the culture here. Everybody wants to go on a hike or do any activities. Sometimes I would not even believe it when I just moved here. We would be like at negative 20 degrees and you would see people running on the trails, and it's something like people will go out, people will do the mountain activities with any kind of weather. So, and not only that, but also there is a lot of healthy eating options, lots of healthy restaurants, and it's just part of the culture here about being healthy and doing mountain activities. And one thing I really liked when I moved here was when people ask you, what do you do? They're really asking, what do you like to do? They're not asking about your job. At least that's something that I really enjoyed, because where I was living before, what do you do, of course, means what job do you have or what career do you have? Where over here, you're like an actual person. They care more about what activities do you do in the mountains as opposed to what do you do for a job. Now let's talk about the weather really quickly. This one I'm gonna say, more likely than not, you're wrong. Most people believe the weather in Denver, Colorado, it's terrible. And I'm here to say it's not as terrible as most people think. Of course, I'm not going to talk in absolutes because everybody has a different opinion. But most people think that Colorado, it's like Montana or Idaho, that once it starts snowing, it's going to snow the whole winter. Like the snow never really leaves the pavement. And that's not true at all. I'm not gonna sit here and say it's as hot as Texas or Florida, but it's really not too bad when you take it into perspective. I would say during the winter months, maybe from December through March, we are gonna have about 2 days a week where we have snow. A lot of the times it's gonna be gone the next day. But the longest I've been here where the snow is actually on the roads, it's probably like 1 week. And that was like an extreme situation. Most of the times it's gonna snow and then it's gonna be gone even that same day or the next day. And I'm gonna say we get about 57 feet of snow, but that's gonna be from October to May. So that's 7 months. Of course, you can do the average, but we don't really have an average. Typically, October, it's gonna be one snowstorm. May, it's gonna be one snowstorm. And again, those are going to be gone by the next day. And I'm going to say that from January through March, which are the harshest months, we're going to have about 30% bad days and 70% good days. They're going to be sunny and enjoyable, whereas you just use a light jacket. Of course, you got to be prepared in case it turns bad at night. And one thing that used to happen to me is that when I was working at an office, I would go in the office and I would have my light jacket, and then at night it would be snowing. So that does happen. It's very variable. In fact, this year we actually had the wildest swing in temperature. I think it was like 50 degrees in 24 hours. So it was just a huge swing. I think it went from like 10 to 60 in a 24-hour period. Now, when it comes to the mountains, it's a completely different story. I went backpacking just for the 4th of July weekend, and I'm gonna tell you, we got snowed on. And of course, it's 4th of July, it's the beginning of July. You would not expect snow at the time, but we were like 12,000 feet up. So it's very different. Over here in Denver, we are 1 mile high. Of course, the mile high city, that's why they call it that. And that's going to be about 5,280 feet. Whereas, of course, 12,000 feet is more than double the elevation. And yes, in the mountains, the weather is very unpredictable. Actually, I'm going to show you this clip from my buddy on that backpacking trip.
So we're on a hike in the mountains. My buddy's coming from Miami. He has some words about the Colorado weather. How's the weather here?
It's very bipolar. It gets cold and then hot, and then it rains, and then there's hail, and then it's sunny again.
How is it right now?
It's a mix of snowy and sunny. It feels beautiful.
Now, of course, a lot of people that are moving here, they have families, they really care about schools. And I'm gonna tell you, the education over here in Colorado, it's average when you compare it to the United States. I was actually surprised to find that out. The rankings take into account student achievement, graduation rates, college readiness, and Colorado, it's typically in the middle of the pack. However, of course, it's gonna depend what schools your kids go to, but in general, Colorado is going to be average. I will say one of the advantages of living in Colorado is that in Colorado, you get to choose your school. It's not like other states where you're forced to join a specific school for your neighborhood. Over here, of course, there's a process, but you can go into school that's not even in your school district. So that's one of the advantages of living here. Now, let's talk about how dry and the altitude is here. Over here, it's super dry. A lot of people, they sleep with humidifiers, or some of them just have it on the living room. It's very common that you find people that have chapstick and they apply it all the time. I am of the belief that once you start doing, you have to keep doing it. And now regarding the altitude, I've always been someone who's training for something, a triathlon or a race or a half marathon or whatever. So I've always been in a relatively good shape. And I remember vividly when I just moved here about 4 years ago now, I was just doing a fast walk, just a regular fast walk to the gym. I always like to park far away so that I get my steps in. I don't get to walk much typically. So I was just doing a fast walk. When I arrived to the reception, I was all out of breath. And I told the woman like, hey, you gotta give me a minute. I gotta catch up my breath. It really is a huge difference from where I was living. But now what I have found out, it took me about 3 to 4 months to actually get used to it in a sense, but it's always going to be tougher being here as opposed to the lower elevation areas. So now when I go to other places, I go to the beach or something and I go for a run, I just feel like I'm Superman. Literally just running down the beach is like so much easier. I'm always doing PRs when I go down there. So that's the advantage of being here. If you're training for something, it's gonna make you so much better when you go to lower elevations. But when you're training here, it's gonna be tougher. And that's the reason why a lot of athletes come over here, especially Colorado Springs and Boulder have tons of athletes that live there, professional athletes. And even Colorado Springs has the Olympic Center. So if you're an athlete, that's a great pro. But if you're a regular person that you don't really work out much, or maybe 1 or 2 times a week, it's gonna be tougher on you. Now let's talk about the cost of living over here in Colorado. Typically, I've seen conflicting reports. I've seen some places that say we're 12% higher than the national average. Others say we're 25% higher. What I'm gonna say is it doesn't really matter. What really matters is what you're actually paying out of pocket, because you can be coming from Coffeyville, Kansas, and it's gonna be so much more expensive for you. But if you're coming from LA, you're actually gonna be having a break. It's gonna be cheaper here. So what I did, I actually created a separate video where I go exactly directly into how much I'm spending every month, and that's groceries, insurance, the housing costs, apartment costs, housing costs. So that's a more complete answer. But for most people that are moving from places that is not California or Illinois, it's typically gonna be more expensive. Now, one thing with Colorado is that we've been having increasing population. Of course, Colorado was the first state that legalized marijuana for recreational use, and that just brought a ton of people to live in the state. And of course, that itself comes with their own pros and cons. But what I'm gonna say is that with the increased population, we have a ton of traffic. The roads weren't built with the infrastructure that it needs to support the people that are living here. The traffic in the mountain can get crazy. Like, you could be waiting in the mountains for 6 to 8 hours when you're coming back, where there is no traffic. It could be a 1-hour drive. So because of all of the influx of people, it kind of created this annoyance, honestly, to living in Colorado. There are people that come here and all they're doing is stealing cars. Denver's actually the city with the third most car theft in the US, and I'm gonna say I know at least 5 other victims, including myself. They tried to get into my car, they broke the window, they messed with the ignition, they couldn't take it. Now I'm dealing with the insurance and I'm dealing with all of these problems as a result of those people trying to steal cars, and this is just happening way too much. You always, if you have Nextdoor, which is an app where you talk to your neighbors, you always see people saying like, hey, my car is not here, have you guys seen it? The police does not even care anymore. When it happened to me, I can tell you, I called the police, they didn't even show up. They had me fill out a police report online. It's been weeks, I haven't heard back. I'm fighting with the insurance, they need the report. It's just creating all these issues. I know someone who they stole his car. He actually found the car himself, not the police. And when he called the police, you know, you find your car, you gotta call them because you don't know what's gonna happen. If the subject is armed or whatever, you really need the police to help you there. It took the police 2.5 hours to get to the scene to recover the car after he found it himself a few weeks after the incident. So it's just complete disregard. The police doesn't care. You kind of on your own. One thing I'm gonna tell you is don't have a Kia, don't have a Hyundai, because I learned that there's something with the ignition, whereas they can turn it on with the USB cable. And what I heard is that there's a TikTok challenge, where people are challenging other people to steal cars. It's just 100% craziness, and this is all the result of the increased population, because you would see, if you look at the stats overall, Denver was never, not even top 10 in car theft. This is something that's very new. So it's just something that if you do decide to move to Colorado, you're gonna have to deal with this. Okay, so now let's talk about natural disasters. This is something that's very important to some people. Maybe they're coming from a specific area where they had tons of natural disasters, and over here, typically you're gonna see more of the wildfire, of course, as a result of how dry it is here. And just a few years ago, we had the most destructive wildfire, the Marshall Fire. I mean, that was like a year and a half ago, and it was just heartbreaking seeing all of the destruction that occurred. That happened in between Boulder and Denver, so very close to the Denver metro area. Tons of houses were burnt down, and of course that's something that it's just very unpredictable. It can happen at any time, so typically that would be most people's major concern. But other than wildfires, of course we have avalanches, but that's going to be over there in the mountains, not really here in Denver. I know REI gives some classes. I believe they were free a few years ago when I looked into it, and it's about avalanche survival, because sometimes I've seen this, or I've heard of this, I should say, that people, even if they're in their cars, they get flipped over by an avalanche. They start digging out of the snow, but they're actually digging in the opposite direction. So of course that could be very tragic, and this just happens every year, so something to take into account. If you want to live in the mountains, you just gotta be prepared for stuff like that to happen. The other thing that happens is the mudslides, and I haven't seen one personally, and the mudslide is basically an avalanche but made out of mud, if you will. I haven't seen it happen, but I've been on hikes where we go through what a mudslide occurred, and it's just, I mean, you could see all the trees fell down. It's just crazy to see, honestly. Now, as it relates to earthquakes, we don't really have many over here. We've had 15 earthquakes since 1880, so it's not much of a concern. Of course, it could happen, but they're typically not as strong. The highest one was a 5.5 magnitude, so it doesn't happen often, and when they do, they're typically not as strong. Now, when it comes to tornadoes, this could be a hit or miss because, for example, for 2022, there were 31 tornadoes in total, but the total monetary value of the damages was $5,000. So what that tells me is that they weren't very strong. But now this year, just a few weeks ago, we had one that was very destructive, and that was in the city. It was actually in Highlands Ranch. So again, this could be hit or miss as well, but there is a risk for tornadoes. It's just not as common as in other places. And what I'm gonna say too is that the closer you are to the mountains, it's the less likelihood of having a tornado. And of course, we don't have any hurricanes here. Of course, we don't have the ocean close by. Now let's talk about the mountains. When people think of Colorado, they're typically gonna envision that nice Maroon Belts mountains or Aspen or Telluride or these awesome mountains that we have just a few hours drive away from Denver. And the thing that I really like is that we actually have both winter and summer activities. And I'm someone who sometimes when I'm starting to do an activity, I kind of get tired of it after a while. So I like to be changing what I'm doing. So for the summer, we have hiking, mountain biking, climbing, ATVs, dirt bike, off-roading. There are activities if you want to be active or if you just want to go off-roading on your Jeep. So there is something for everybody. Now, as it relates to the winter, there is skiing, snowboarding, snowmobiling, snowshoeing, and it's the same concept, whereas you really can do it if you really want to. You don't really have to be in shape. Of course, it's preferable. And not only that, but we also have water activities. There's tons of lakes, tons of rivers. So we got kayaking. A lot of people in the city, they like tubing the Platte River. It's very popular. There is another river up in Boulder where people love going tubing. There is rafting and stand-up paddleboarding. Those are activities that you can do even within the city. There's many lakes where you can just pull up your kayak, your stand-up paddleboard, and just go. And like I said, having the variety of sports, it's really cool because when you're starting to get tired of one, you can switch to the other. Or you can go hiking one weekend and mountain biking the next. There is a tons of activities to do. And that's one of the things people like the most about living in Colorado. There's a lot of national parks here. There is the Rocky Mountain National Park, literally less than a 2-hour drive from Denver. We have the sand dunes, Black Canyon of Gunnison, Mesa Verde, and not only that, but also within a relatively close driving distance, and I'm talking about 8 to 9 hours, you're gonna have Yellowstone, the Tetons, Mount Rushmore, Devil's Tower, Arches National Park, Zion. So once you're here, you have the opportunity of making good road trips and going into these areas that are just incredible. And I can tell you, when I was living in Dallas, if I was gonna make an 8-hour road trip, I would go to New Orleans. But other than that, we have Austin, and that was it. 8 hours anywhere else was not going to take me to these awesome places that people from all over the world come to see. So if you have a week off and you work over here in Denver, you can literally hit the Yellowstone, the Tetons, and Mount Rushmore in 1 week trip. I almost forgot to say, there's also activities for kids. Watching wildlife, at least for me, it's one of the coolest things to do over here. There is bighorn sheep, there is mountain goats, elk, moose. Over here in Colorado, we don't have grizzly bears, but we do have black bears. And not just that, but there's also hot springs in the area. Some of them you're encouraged to be nude. I'm not confirming or denying that I've been to any one of those, but I'm gonna say there are cool experiences. typically you get to sit on the hot spring, and typically it's outside. Sometimes it's awesome when it's snowing on the outside and you're in the hot spring. So just awesome activities that you can do once you're here. And the night sky, it's just incredible, especially when you go camping. You're gonna see so many stars. And one time actually I went camping, and you know when there's a lunar eclipse that the moon turns red. So I think, and I'm just speculating, we were so high up in altitude that when we saw the moon coming up, it was actually that red color. So I'm speculating that the Earth's shadow was hitting on the moon and creating that effect even when there's no eclipse. So that was a very cool experience, and that's something that you really can just get when you're here. You go camping, you're gonna see all of these cool things that are not available in other places. Another benefit of living in Colorado is a diversified economy. At least over here in Denver, we have aerospace. We have two of the biggest aerospace technology companies in the US over here. There's finance jobs over there in the Denver Tech Center and DTC. There's tech jobs, of course. There are telecommunication companies like Comcast is based out of Denver now because Denver's geography is so much better for their business model. There is universities, there is tourism. So that's one thing that I like, because it's not like a mining town or an oil town, whereas if the price for that commodity goes down, your whole town is kind of going away. So of course, having a diversified economy, it's going to be better for most people. And lastly, Colorado is very family friendly. When you go skiing or snowboarding, you're always going to see 2 or 3 year olds just coming down the mountain. It's very cool to see. It's kind of funny, especially when they fall, because it's like a little thing just falling. They don't even feel the pain. It's a cool thing to see. Of course, they're not doing the black routes. They're going into the green and learning, but it's just cool to see 2 or 3 year old kids just having that enjoyment for the mountains that we all want over here in Denver or over here in Colorado. You'll see them camping, you'll see them playing outside, and over here in the city there's tons of activities. There is the aquarium, Denver Museum of Science, the zoo, and my favorite, most underrated attraction in Denver, which is Dinosaur Ridge, where you literally get to see steps from the dinosaurs in the rock. So just one thing that you typically don't see other people talking about it. I think it's one of the coolest things that we have. But of course, that's just my opinion. And it's just by Red Rock. So if you're coming to visit, go check it out. And lastly, we have casinos over here in Colorado. It's actually a town called Black Hawk, and it's a mountain town. I don't really know why. It's the only place I've seen casinos in. But if you get to see it, it's literally just a little mountain town with a few huge buildings for the casino. It's a casino hotel. I think Monarch Mountain also has a casino. I might be wrong. But Black Hawk, it's maybe like an hour away from Denver. There is a little bus that can take you from Denver to there, like a shuttle, and it's gonna be, of course, paid by the casino. They want you to go there. They want you to spend money, and it's just a cool experience. You don't have to worry about commuting or anything like that. You can just go out for a day and just enjoy yourself. So fun stuff. We have a casino in the area. So is Colorado a good state to live in? In my opinion, it is. It has everything I need, from sporting events, the mountains, the concerts. It has everything that I want. And I know it's not for everybody. It might not be for you. It's gonna depend on your priorities and what's important for you. Now, Denver might not be for you. Aspen might not be for you. I get it. Everybody wants different things. Our job with this channel is giving you an honest opinion of what's like living in Denver, Colorado, and the surrounding areas, and actually showing you these places instead of just reading about it. So right now, hit the subscribe button. We do videos every week. They're the most in-depth videos about living in Denver, Colorado, and the surrounding areas. And also, drop a comment down below what areas you want to see next. Until next time, see you later.